Hello, Wanderers! Today in the Beginner's Guide, I'll be discussing the story of Maeglin, an elf whose mother was a Noldor from Gondor and whose father was a Sindar from Beleriand. We'll see contrasting characters, the haughtiness of the elven houses, and a king's judgment that leads to attempted murder. Today's episode is an analysis of a chapter called Of Maeglin in a book called The Silmarillion, written by JRR Tolkien and published in 1977 by Ballantine Books. A link to purchase The Silmarillion is in the show notes. Welcome. In the Beginner's Guide to the Lord of the Rings podcast, we explore the foundational, epic stories from the deep past of Middle-earth. If you enjoy J.R.R. Tolkien's books, or maybe Peter Jackson's movies, or perhaps you're excited for Amazon Studios' new series, The Rings of Power, and you want to dive deeper into the rich world of Middle-earth, then listen and subscribe. Lagovanian, fellow wanderers. Today's episode date is March 24. On this day in Middle-earth, in the year 3019 of the Third Age, Aragorn's army camps around the Black Gate of Mordor as a distraction for the armies of Sauron. Frodo and Sam make the last stretch of their journey on the feet of Mount Doom. This is adapted from Today in Middle-earth History Calendar on theonering.net. Let's check the map and review the context of today's story. It is the First Age of Middle-earth. In the north of Beleriand, the Noldor have set the siege of Angband against the Dark Lord Morgoth, who possesses the stolen Silmarils. Gondolin, a hidden city, is founded by Turgon, son of Fingolfin. Relations among the various houses of the elves are tenuous, but in many places, like Gondolin, the Noldor and the Sindar have successfully mingled, even with King Thingol's ban on the Noldorin language. We begin today with Turgon's sister Adadhel. She is also given the title of the White Lady of the Noldor. To review the family relationships for just a moment, Adadhel is a daughter of Fingolfin, and thus niece to Feanor. She is sister to Turgon, who founded Gondolin, and sister to Fingon, who saved their cousin Maedhros from the mountaintop chaining at the hands of Morgoth. Also, she is cousin to Galadriel. That's a lot of names to throw at you at once, but I think you'll be able to connect some of the dots there. In the back of the Silmarillion is a great family history chart for Finwë, who was one of the three noble elves that founded the original three houses of the elves, specifically the Noldor. Adadhel dwells in Gondolin, but after about 200 years desires to leave and see the forests of Beleriand again. Turgon is very hesitant to allow her to do so, seeing as how he wants to keep the way into Gondolin secret, and that's easy to do when everyone who knows how to get to Gondolin dwells in Gondolin. But eventually he allows her to leave with a small escort. They travel to the east, for Adadhel desired to visit Celegorm, one of the sons of Feanor, but they are not allowed to travel through Doriath, and so turn to the side to skirt the northern border of Doriath. However, this land is dangerous and haunted, being the place where Ungoliant, the giant spider monster, had lived for some time after helping Morgoth steal the Silmarils. Adadhel becomes separated from her companions, and after searching for some time, they assume that she has perished and return to Gondolin to inform Turgon. Adadhel did not perish, however, but made it through that dangerous stretch of land, eventually arriving at Celegorm's kingdom and dwelling with his people for a time, even though Celegorm himself is far from home. In time, Adadhel rides out again and becomes, quote, enmeshed in a small forest called Nan Elmoth. The trees in Nan Elmoth are some of the tallest and oldest in all of Beleriand, and so this forest is quite dark. The darkness is to the liking of an elf by the name of Eöl, who was a noble of some sort in the kingdom of Thingol, but had since removed himself to live in isolation, quiet, and darkness. Eöl preferred the company of dwarves to that of his own kind, often being their guest in their ancient halls, and from them he learned much in terms of smithing and crafting. He himself created a unique sort of metal called Galvorn, which had a shiny black color, was as hard as steel, but still malleable enough to be made into armor. From this metal he also created a pair of swords, that we will get into in future episodes, for these swords did both mighty and murderous deeds. Anyway, back to Adadhel. She eventually finds her way to Eöl's halls deep in the woods, and Eöl welcomes her, and eventually convinces her to marry him. Together they wander far under the stars. Now, the contrast here is rather striking. On the one hand, we have Adadhel, who is known as the White Lady of the Noldor. She is of noble birth and high kin. Tolkien even describes her in the dark forest of Nan Elmoth as, quote, a gleam of white in a dim land. Adadhel is set against Eöl, also known as the Dark Elf, who loves the dark and shuns the light. He lives in the depths of a dark forest, even inventing a new black metal. Adadhel is of the Noldor, a faction of elves that came to Valinor to see the light of the trees. Eöl is of the Teleri, which started on the journey to see the trees of Valinor, but never left Middle-earth, making him one of the Sindar elves. Lastly, Adadhel is friends with the sons of Feanor, her cousins, but Eöl shuns all of the Noldor, blaming them for the return of Morgoth to Middle-earth. So here is a story of opposites attracting. But not only do they attract, they produce a mingling of their opposites. For Aradhel bears a son. Because Aradhel is of the Noldor, she secretly gives her son a name in the banned language. The name is Lomion, which means child of the twilight. I find that name significant because twilight is a transition time, a liminal space, in between day and night, where the light of the sun is obscured and begins to mingle with darkness. So, is her son a follower of light, like his mother, or a lover of darkness and secrecy, as was his father? Eöl doesn't give his son a name until 12 years later, when he provides him a Sindarin name, Maeglin, meaning sharp glance. Eöl gives him this name because he perceives that his son has a great ability to see in darkness, both literally and figuratively, as Maeglin could, quote, read the secrets of hearts beyond the mist of words. Maeglin is a mix of his contrasting parents. In outward form, he resembled the Noldor of his mother's kin, dark hair, dark eyes that were also bright, with white skin. But his mind and manners were more like his father, perceptive, secretive, and persuasive. He also learned much from the dwarves, especially how to find precious metals to draw from the mountains. Aradhel shared all the stories of the Noldor with Maeglin, and he perceived that Turgon in Gondolin had no male heir, for his only child was his daughter, Idril Celebrimbor, and his wife had perished in the crossing of the grinding ice. Aradhel never revealed the location of Gondolin, nor how to arrive there, but Maeglin was patient, quote, trusting yet to wheedle the secret from her. In time, Maeglin convinces his mother to take him to Gondolin, and they decide to escape while Eöl is visiting the dwarves in the far east. However, Eöl returned from his visit sooner than they thought, and he pursued them, although he believed that they had gone north to see the sons of Feanor. Now, this next exchange demonstrates the tenuous relationships between the different elven houses, and in particular the haughtiness of Feanor's sons. Eöl eventually runs into Carufin, one of Feanor's sons. Eöl feels that he is in peril and danger, and restrains some of his more bitter words. From Carufin, Eöl learns that his wife and son did not ride that way, and he asks leave to go and discover where they went. Carufin answers, quote, you have my leave, but not my love. The sooner you depart my land, the better will it please me. As a quick side note, one thing you'll see in Tolkien's works is that he'll take a common idiom or phrase and tweak it just a little, almost as if giving it some historical context. Like Carufin's answer to Eöl here. It's a play on the sooner the better. But just a simple phrase wouldn't be good enough for Tolkien. And I wonder how cool it would be if we all started speaking in Tolkienian phrases. Also, this phrase would have struck at the core of Eöl's anger, because in his mind the Noldor, including Carufin, had no legitimate claim over any of the lands of Beleriand. As Eöl is mounting his horse, he names Carufin a kinsman. He could claim that because his wife was a cousin to Carufin. But Carufin rebukes Eöl's use of that word by saying, quote, do not flaunt the title of your wife before me. So clearly, Carufin didn't recognize Eöl as a kinsman, going so far as to reject him and remind him that the laws forbade Carufin from slaying Eöl at that time. Which makes me wonder, if the law were not so, would Carufin have slain Eöl in this moment? They clearly didn't like each other. They clearly had great animosity towards each other. Carufin took part in the kinslaying, which would have been against Eöl's own people. So obviously there was a lot of discord and maybe even hatred between the different elven houses. I think this demonstrates, though, that not all elves are the same. In Peter Jackson's movies, the elves are portrayed as being above petty disputes, morally above the other weaker races. But we also see that they had a lot of pride, particularly in their family lines, and this exchange between Eöl, a Sindar, and Carufin, a Noldor, demonstrates this. Eöl now guesses the mind of Aradhel and starts riding west to pick up their trail to Gondolin. Though he never got close enough to see them, their horses called to their fellow horse that Eöl was riding, and he thus learned the area of the gate to the underground road to Gondolin. We're not done yet. If you like this episode, please leave a review and share with your friends. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be right back.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
Back in Gondolin, Turgon rejoices to see his sister, whom he thought was lost forever. and he accepted Maeglin as one of the Noldor. Here again is a set of contrasting characters. Turgon, a Noldorin king, accepts Maeglin as a Noldor, though Curufin rejects Eowl's claims to kinship. Remember also that Turgon was a son of Fingolfin, the High King of the Noldor, while Curufin was a son of Feanor, whose pride and haughtiness had effectively driven the Noldor to leave Valinor. Eol was taken captive near the gates, and when the guard heard that he claimed Aradhel as wife, they eventually set Eol to judgment before King Turgon. Eol is filled with awe at the might of the city of Gondolin, but that simply stoked more hatred in his heart for all of the Noldor. Turgon also welcomes Eol, even calling him kinsman, again very different from Curufin's rejection, yet Turgon forbids Eol to even leave Gondolin again. Eowl's response to this acceptance, even being called kinsman, is shocking, and yet reveals how fragile the relationships among the elven houses actually were. Eol says, quote, "I acknowledge not your law. No right have you or any of your kin in this land to seize realms or to set bounds. This is the land of the Teleri." It's interesting that Eol, who was self-restrained and claimed kinship in front of Curufin, here is unbridled and rejects kinship from one who had freely offered it. I think this demonstrates the doom of the Noldor that was pronounced upon them after the kinslaying as they were leaving Valinor. In that prophecy, it was said that treachery and even fear of treachery would ever haunt the Noldor. In this case, Eol would never trust them, for they had participated in the slaying of his kin, the Teleri. Eol relinquishes his claim on Aradhel to return with him, but bids his son, Maeglin, to leave Gondolin and return to their dark forests. Maeglin says nothing. Turgon passes his judgment, saying to Eol, quote, "This choice only is given to you, to abide here or to die here, and so also for your son." We've seen this theme before, choice. Choice is a powerful and dangerous concept, sometimes made in haste and sometimes never taken. Admittedly, the choice before Eol is not particularly empowering, as either choice leaves him in Gondolin. But this choice also brings up another idea, the immortality of the elves. You see, to you and me, who are mortal and know that we must die, that choice would seem even more lame, because we know we would die in Gondolin no matter which option we chose. But for the elves, who did not die of old age, this was essentially a life sentence for the rest of time. Eol, in his pride, rejects the first option, to live in Gondolin, and he decides for Maeglin as well. Revealing a black javelin from under his cloak, he throws it at Maeglin, intending to kill his own son. But Aradhel jumped in front of it and was hit in the shoulder. She died later that night due to an unbeknownst poison on the javelin. Now Turgon has no mercy for Eol. He is sentenced to death by being cast down from a black rock in the north of the city. But before being cast over, he prophesies that Maeglin will also find his death at the same black rock. Maeglin thrived in the city of Gondolin. He had much to teach about finding ores and mining, as well as crafting of weapons, and he made the arms of the people of Gondolin stronger than before. It's possible, though the record doesn't explicitly state this, that the swords that Gandalf and Thorin would bear in the Third Age of Middle-earth were crafted at this time. I mentioned the origin of those swords in my previous episode. But not all was well with Maeglin. From his first moments in Gondolin, Maeglin was ever attracted to Idril, King Turgon's daughter. But there were a few problems with this. First, they were cousins, and the laws amongst the elves forbade such a union. But even if that wasn't the case, the second problem was that Idril did not love him back. Indeed, she was repulsed by him, thinking that his love for her was something, quote, strange and crooked. So with time, Maeglin became more sullen and resentful, and while he would later fight alongside King Turgon, quote, a dark seed of evil was sown. So that's Maeglin. A few things to note as we wrap up. You can see how the doom of the Noldor affects even day-to-day relationships amongst the elves. Keep a mental note of the choice that Turgon gave to Maeglin's father, to live or die in Gondolin, because that judgment will be contrasted against another of King Turgon's judgments that we'll encounter in the future. And while Gondolin is a mighty and proud city, its fall is a definitive moment in the First Age of Middle-earth. And we'll see how Maeglin's misplaced love will eventually become the leverage that Morgoth needs to bring down the city. Please join me next Thursday, where I'll share the first stories of the first houses of men that came into Beleriand and allied with the elves. Thanks for listening. Hi friends, if you enjoyed this episode, let me know by subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing with your friends. For feedback on the show, please email me at lordoftheringspodcast@gmail.com or find me on Instagram at Beginner's Guide LOTR Podcast. Until next week, remember, not all those who wander are lost.